The Riviera Lounge in Las Vegas was the kind of place where smoke hung heavier than secrets, and every man thought he was the most important person in the room. Gold-trimmed mirrors lined the walls. Crystal glasses clinked like quiet threats. The band tuned up under low amber lights while servers in black and white moved like chess pieces between velvet booths. And at the center of it all stood Dean Martin. Not the Dean the world would later worship. Not the polished legend. Not the king of cool. Tonight, he was just another singer fighting to stay upright in a room that smelled of money and danger. Dean adjusted the microphone stand, forcing a small grin. His tuxedo fit well, but it couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. He'd sung in rough places before dive bars, broken stages, rooms full of drunks. This place had power in it, and this place had power in it, and power didn't like being ignored. From the back booth, a man sat like a shadow carved out of smoke. They called him Vito Morelli, Mafia boss, casino king, untouchable. He didn't talk much. He didn't laugh much. But when he looked at someone, it felt like judgment had already been passed. Dean felt that look on him now. He didn't know why Morelli had asked for him to perform. That alone should have been a warning. When men like Morelli requested something, it wasn't a compliment, it was a test. The pianist gave the cue. Dean closed his eyes, sang. His voice rolled out smooth, warm, and confident like honey over broken glass. The room softened at first. Few conversations died down. A few eyes turned toward the stage, but not Morelli's. Vito Morelli leaned back, unimpressed. Halfway through the song, Morelli raised one finger. The band stopped. The silence was violent. Dean opened his eyes slowly. Morelli's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Hey, singer." Every head turned. Dean swallowed. "Yes, sir." Morelli smirked. "You think you're something special." Dean hesitated. "I just try to do my job." Morelli laughed once. Your job is to entertain. And right now, you're boring me." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Dean's face stayed calm, but inside his chest, something dropped. Morelli leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You sound like every other nobody who walks into this town thinking he's a star. Let me tell you something. Kid Vegas eats men like you for breakfast." The room went quiet again. Dean felt the heat in his cheeks. Not anger, humiliation. Morelli raised his glass. "Sing something worth my time, or get off my stage." It wasn't a request, it was a threat. Dean nodded slowly. Of course. He turned back to the mic, but his hands were shaking now. The pianist looked at him with concern. The next song began. But before Dean could get past the first verse, Morelli stood up. "Stop." The band froze again. Morelli walked toward the stage. Every step echoed. He stopped inches from Dean and looked him up and down. "You see, kid, you don't have presence. You don't scare anyone. You don't command respect." He leaned in. "And in my world, if you don't command respect, you don't survive." Dean felt the eyes of the room burning into him. Wealthy men, dangerous men, women with painted smiles. No one moved. Morelli raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when talent walks in without backbone." He turned to Dean. "Get on your knees." The room gasped. Dean didn't move. Morelli's eyes narrowed. You didn't hear me." Dean's heart slammed against his ribs. This wasn't about music anymore. This was about power. And power wanted obedience. Dean took one step back. "I'm here to sing," he said quietly. Not to beg. A dangerous pause. Then Morelli laughed. But there was no humor in it. He turned to the crowd. "You hear that? The singer's got pride." He stepped closer. "Let's see how long it lasts." Two of Morelli's men moved, not fast, not loud, just enough to remind everyone who owned the room. Dean felt the pressure of the moment closing around him like a fist. He could kneel. He could survive the night. But something inside him refused. Not arrogance, not ego. Something deeper. Dignity. Dean lifted his chin. I won't kneel. The room went ice cold. Morelli stared at him. For a long time. Then he smiled. All right, he raised his hand. Then sing. The band started again. Dean's voice came out stronger this time, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he was. He sang like a man who had nothing left to lose. Every note was defiance. Every word was fire. People leaned in. Something changed in the air. Even Morelli stopped smiling. Dean finished the song. Silence. Then slow applause. One man. Then another. Then more. The room came alive. Morelli didn't clap. He stared. Dean met his eyes. Not with anger. Not with fear. But with calm. Morelli turned away. Get him off my stage. Two men grabbed Dean's arms. The crowd froze again. Dean didn't fight. He just walked. Out of the light, out of the room. Out into the cold Vegas night. And as the door slammed behind him, Dean Martin didn't know it yet. But that humiliation would become the fire that built a legend. The Vegas night swallowed Dean Martin whole. The door behind him slammed shut like the end of a life he thought he understood. Inside the Riviera Lounge, music picked back up. Laughter returned. Power went on as if nothing had happened. Outside, Dean stood alone. Neon lights buzzed overhead. The desert air was cold and sharp. His breath fogged in front of him as he tried to steady himself. Humiliated? Cola, not just embarrassed taste. He had walked onto that stage a singer. He walked off it a warning. Dean took a slow step forward, then another. His legs felt hollow. Every sound from the strip felt distant, like he was underwater. A voice in his head kept repeating Morelli's words. In my world, if you don't command respect, you don't survive. Dean laughed bitterly to himself. Then maybe your world isn't worth surviving in. But even as he said it, reality hit harder than pride ever could. Morelli didn't just insult him. He blacklisted him. By morning, every club owner in Vegas would know his name for the wrong reason. And in this town, reputation was oxygen. Lose it, and you suffocate. The silence after the storm. 2 days passed, then 5, then 10. No calls, no bookings, no callbacks. Dean went from headlining to haunting. He walked into club after club with the same polite smile, the same resume, the same confidence, only to watch faces change the second his name was recognized. Sorry, kid, we're full. Try again next month. Not tonight. One owner didn't even pretend. You're the guy who crossed Morelli, right? Dean nodded. The man leaned back. You got guts. I respect that. Then he shook his head. But I got a business to protect. And just like that, Dean was back on the sidewalk. Hunger teaches fast. By week 3, the money was gone. The suits stayed in the closet. The hotel room turned into a cheap boarding house with thin walls and thinner blankets. Dean started singing for tips in back rooms, then alley bars, then nowhere at all. One night, he sat on a curb behind a diner with a cold coffee in his hands, watching steam rise from the trash bins. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. His hands shook not from fear now, but from hunger. That's when a voice behind him said, "You sound better when you're angry." Dean turned. A man stood there with a wrinkled coat and eyes sharp as broken glass. Older, weathered, a musician's hands. You were at the Riviera, the man said. I heard you sing after Morelli tried to break you. Dean scoffed. Then you heard the part where I got thrown out. The man smiled. No, I heard the part where you didn't kneel. He held out a cigarette. Dean hesitated, then took it. My name's Sal Russo, the man said. Used to play piano before this town chewed me up. Dean lit the cigarette. Guess it's my turn, Dean muttered. Sal shook his head. Not if you learn what the fall is trying to teach you. Dean looked at him. And what's that? Sal pointed to Dean's chest. Your voice ain't the gift. Dean frowned. Then what is? Sal leaned in close. Your spine, the secret school of power. Sal took Dean somewhere no map could show. A rundown jazz basement beneath an old hotel. No sign, no crowd. Smoke, sweat, and soul. Inside were musicians who had been ignored, discarded, underestimated. But when they played, they owned the room. Sal made Dean perform every night. Not for applause, not for money. For truth, no tricks, Sal said. No charm, no masks, just sing like your life depends on it. Dean did. At first, his voice cracked. Then it burned. Then it changed. Abana. He stopped trying to impress. He started commanding. The room listened. Then leaned in. Then held its breath. Sal watched from the shadows, nodding. Now you're dangerous, he said one night. Not to them. To anyone who underestimates you. The rumor returns, words started to move. Not through headlines, through whispers. There's a singer underground who makes grown men cry. He don't smile. He don't beg. He just owns the mic. One night, a woman in diamonds came down the basement steps. She watched Dean perform. Didn't clap, didn't smile. Just stared. After the show, she approached him. You're Dean Martin, she said. Dean tensed. Was? She shook her head. Still are. She leaned in. Morelli's been asking about you. Dean's blood went cold. Why? He asked. She smiled slowly. Because the room he owns hasn't felt alive since the night he tried to break you. The invitation. 3 nights later, Dean got the message. A black envelope. No return name. Just 2 words inside. Tomorrow, midnight, and an address. Sal read it and went quiet. That's Morelli's private casino floor, he said. Dean swallowed. Sal put a hand on his shoulder. You go in there the same man you were that night. You'll walk out the same ghost. Dean nodded. I'm not that man anymore. The moment before the storm. That night, Dean stood in front of the mirror. Same face, different fire. The humiliation hadn't killed him. It had forged him. And as he walked into the lion's den, he didn't know whether he'd walk out alive. But he knew one thing for certain. This time, he wouldn't be the one on his knees. The elevator ride to Morelli's private floor felt longer than it should have. Dean Martin stood alone inside the mirrored box, watching his own reflection change as the numbers climbed. Same face, same eyes. But something in them had hardened like steel under fire. The doors opened without a sound, and just like that, he was back in the lion's world. Gold everywhere, velvet everywhere. Men in tailored suits standing still like statues. No music, no laughter. Only power waiting to be fed. Dean stepped out. 2 guards flanked him instantly. Not rough, not gentle, professional. They walked him down a hallway lined with framed photographs, Morelli shaking hands with politicians, celebrities, judges. People who pretended they didn't know him, but owed him everything. At the end of the hall, double doors, they opened, and there he was, Vito Morelli, sitting at the same kind of table where he had humiliated Dean weeks ago. But this time, no crowd, no noise, just tension. Morelli looked up and smiled. Mr. Martin, he said smoothly, you look different. Dean didn't answer. Morelli waved the guards away. Leave us. The door shut. The room belonged to 2 men now. The test begins. Morelli stood and walked toward Dean slowly. You know why I called you here? He asked. Dean met his eyes. You were bored. Morelli chuckled. No, I was curious. He circled Dean. You see, men who kneel quickly don't interest me, but men who refuse. He stopped in front of Dean. They either get broken or they become dangerous. Dean didn't move. Morelli leaned in. So tell me, which one are you? Dean answered calmly, I'm the one you couldn't forget. For the first time, Morelli didn't smile. He turned and went back to his chair. Sing, he said. No microphone, no band, no lights. Just voice and power. Dean took a breath and sang. Not loud, not flashy, but deep. The kind of voice that didn't ask permission, it commanded it. The room changed. The air thickened. Even Morelli stopped pretending to be bored. When Dean finished, silence stretched. Then Morelli slowly clapped. Impressive, he said. Dean didn't bow, didn't thank him. Morelli tilted his head. You've learned something, he said. Not from teachers, but from pain. Dean nodded. You taught me, he replied. By trying to take my dignity. Morelli laughed softly. Careful, he said. That kind of honesty gets people buried. Dean's eyes didn't blink. So does underestimating someone. The temperature in the room dropped. The deal with the devil. Morelli leaned back in his chair. I don't like wasting talent, he said, especially talent that can control a room. He gestured to the empty stage behind him. Vegas needs a new voice, and I decide what Vegas hears. Dean knew what was coming. A contract. A leash. Morelli slid a folder across the table. Top billing. Big money, private protection. You sing where I tell you, when I tell you. Dean opened it. Read one line. Closed it. You own me, Dean said flatly. Morelli shrugged. Everyone's owned by someone. Dean pushed the folder back. Not me. The room froze. Morelli stood again. Slowly. Do you know how many men have turned down what I just offered? Dean shook his head. None. Morelli's smile vanished. You're either brave or suicidal, Dean replied quietly. Or I finally know my worth. The trapped Morelli studied him for a long time. Then he nodded. All right, he said. Let's see how valuable you really are. He snapped his fingers. The doors opened. The guards returned, and so did the crowd. The private floor filled with high rollers, power players, dangerous men. A stage rose from the floor. Lights snapped on. Morelli leaned close to Dean. Sing, he whispered. And if they don't love you, you won't leave. Dean understood. This wasn't a performance. It was a trial. He walked to the stage. No band, no safety net. Just him. He closed his eyes and gave them everything. Not charm, not smoothness. Truth, regret, fire. Pain turned into power. The room changed. People leaned forward. Women forgot to breathe. Men stopped pretending they were untouchable. Dean finished. Silence. Then, applause. Not polite, not forced. Thunderous, Morelli watched, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. The power shifts. Morelli stood. The room went quiet. He walked onto the stage. Everyone held their breath. He stopped in front of Dean, stared. Then, slowly, Vito Morelli lowered his head. Not fully, not publicly, but just enough. A gesture only Dean saw. Respect. Morelli leaned in. Looks like you survived. Dean met his eyes. I didn't just survive, he said. I changed the room. Morelli stepped back, and something dangerous passed between them. Not hatred, not friendship. Recognition. Two men who knew the rules had just been rewritten. The applause didn't stop. It rolled through Morelli's private floor like thunder trapped in velvet walls. Men who never clapped for anyone were on their feet. Women with diamonds in their hair stared like they'd just seen something holy and dangerous at the same time. Dean Martin stood center stage, not smiling, not bowing, just breathing. Because he knew the truth. This wasn't over. Not yet. From the edge of the stage, Vito Morelli watched him, and for the first time in his life, Vito Morelli felt small. The king without a throne. Morelli raised one hand. The room obeyed instantly. Silence dropped like a curtain. He stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "Enjoy yourselves," he said calmly. "The night's just getting started." The crowd relaxed again. Music returned. Drinks flowed. Power pretended nothing had shifted, but Dean felt it. The center of gravity in the room had moved, and it was standing in his shoes. Morelli turned to him quietly. "Walk with me." Dean followed him down a side hallway into a private lounge, smaller, darker, more dangerous. The kind of room where decisions ended lives. The door shut. They were alone again. Morelli poured 2 drinks, handed one to Dean. Dean didn't take it. Morelli smirked, still careful. Dean met his eyes, still alive. Morelli took a sip, then sat down. "You embarrassed me that night at the Riviera," Morelli said. "Not in front of the room, in front of myself." Dean didn't speak. Morelli continued. "I wanted you to kneel because I needed to feel bigger than you." That admission hung heavy in the air. Morelli looked down at his glass, and you didn't. The confession, Morelli stood again and paced. "You want to know the truth, Martin?" Dean nodded once. Morelli stopped in front of him. "I built everything I have by making people afraid. Afraid to say no. Afraid to look me in the eye." He looked straight at Dean. "You were the first man in years who didn't look away." Dean's voice was calm. "Fear isn't power. It's a shortcut." Morelli laughed bitterly. "And shortcuts don't last forever." He turned back to the table. "You could destroy me," Morelli said suddenly. Dean raised an eyebrow. "With your voice," Morelli went on. "You don't just entertain. You move people, and people who move together. Stop kneeling." Dean understood now. This wasn't about contracts. This was about control. Morelli leaned forward. "So, I brought you here tonight to decide something." Dean waited. Morelli said quietly, "Whether I break you, we'll learn from you. The moment of truth." Morelli snapped his fingers. The door opened. The guard stepped in with a third man between them, beaten, bloody, terrified. Morelli gestured. "This man stole from me." Dean looked at the man, young, desperate, shaking. Morelli said coldly, "In my world, that means he disappears." Dean felt the room close in. Morelli turned to him. "Your voice controls hearts. Let's see what it does with justice." Dean understood the test. Not strength, not talent. Character. Dean stepped forward. Looked the man in the eyes. "What did you steal?" Dean asked. The man whispered, "Money for my sister. She's sick." Morelli scoffed. "Everyone's got a story." Dean turned to Morelli. "Stories are where humanity lives." Morelli's jaw tightened. Dean faced him fully now. "You want to see power," Dean said. "Then don't make him disappear." The guards stiffened. Morelli raised a hand to stop them. Dean continued. "Make him stand." Morelli studied him. Then, slowly, he nodded. The guards loosened their grip. The man collapsed to his knees. Dean stepped closer, not towering over him, not shaming him. Lifting him up, "Go home," Dean said quietly. "And don't come back here." The man broke down crying. Morelli watched, and something cracked behind his eyes. The kneeling of the king. The man was escorted out. The door shut. Morelli stood still for a long time. Then he did something no one in Vegas had ever seen. Vito Morelli lowered himself, not all the way. Not in front of the crowd, but enough. Enough that Dean knew what it meant. Respect. Surrender. A king admitting he'd met something stronger than fear. Morelli looked up at Dean from that lowered stance. "You didn't take my power," he said. "You showed me a better one." Dean spoke softly. "You already knew it. You just forgot." Morelli stood. Different now, not smaller, but human. The legend is born. The next morning, the Strip woke up to rumors, not headlines, not newspapers. Whispers, the boss spared a man last night because of a singer. A singer who doesn't kneel. Dean Martin walked out of Morelli's world not as a performer, but as a force, and he never went back to the underground again. From that night on, his career didn't rise quietly. It exploded. Because people don't follow power, they follow truth. And Dean Martin had finally become both. Sometimes the world will try to break you. Not because you're weak, but because your strength makes it uncomfortable. Never kneel to fear. Never trade dignity for safety. Because the day you stop begging is the day even kings start listening.